The Texas sun had barely risen when the livestock trailer rolled up the dusty driveway of Broken Horn Cattle Ranch. The morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes before a long day of ranch work. Boyd Cartwright, 68 years old and worn from decades in the saddle, stood on his porch with a cup of coffee in hand. He expected the powerful cutting horse he'd ordered, the one he hoped would help him manage the growing cattle herd. What he got instead made his heart nearly stop. The trailer hissed as it came to a halt. The driver, a stocky man named Willie, jumped out with a clipboard. "You Boyd Cartwright?" he called. "That's me," Boyd answered as he walked toward the trailer. "You got my new cutting horse?" Willie checked the papers, scratching his head. "Got a horse for you?" "Says here, Thunderstrike, registered miniature horse, shipped from Oklahoma, destination Broken Horn Cattle Ranch, Bexar County." Boyd froze. "Miniature horse?" "Son, I ordered a 15-hand quarter horse. A working horse. What in the world am I supposed to do with a miniature horse?" Quote. Willie didn't argue. He simply opened the trailer. "Look, mister, I just deliver them. Paperwork says he belongs here. He's been on the road 2 days. Needs out." What stepped out of that trailer made Boyd's jaw drop like a rock in a well. Thunderstrike was a horse, technically, but tiny, barely 32 inches tall. No bigger than a large dog. His black and white pinto coat shone in the early light, his long mane brushed the dust, and his eyes, deep, dark, intelligent, looked straight into Boyd's soul. "That's not a horse," Boyd whispered. "That's a mistake." "That's a registered American miniature horse," Willie corrected. "Premium bloodlines. Rejected by 3 facilities for aggressive behavior." Then Willie shoved the paperwork into Boyd's hands, climbed back into his truck, and drove off in a cloud of dust. Boyd stood there alone with the tiny animal, who looked around the ranch with a heavy sadness in his eyes. The quarter horses in the nearby pasture leaned over their fence, snorting at the newcomer. Thunderstrike could have walked under their bellies without touching a hair. "Well, little fella," Boyd murmured, "looks like somebody made a mighty small mistake." But as he studied the miniature horse more closely, he saw rope burns on his neck, scars on his legs, a tired posture that didn't fit the label of aggressive. He looked more like something that had been pushed too far by people who didn't understand him. Within the hour, Magnolia Birch, Boyd's neighbor and lifelong friend, pulled up in her truck. She ran a small equine rescue and had known Boyd since they were kids. She took one look at the tiny creature and gasped, "Boyd Cartwright, what in Texas is that?" "Apparently my new cutting horse," he said, handing her the papers. Magnolia flipped through them. Her eyebrows shot up. "Boy, do you know what you've got? This little horse's bloodline is worth serious money. His sire sold for more than most people make in a year." "Then why did all those places reject him?" Boyd asked. Before Magnolia could answer, Thunderstrike walked up to the fence. Up close, he seemed even smaller, but there was a softness in his eyes that didn't match the warnings on the paperwork. Magnolia knelt and held out her hand. The miniature gently lowered his head and touched her palm with a slow, trusting breath. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. "You aren't mean." "You're hurt." Boyd watched quietly. Something about that moment stirred a part of him he thought had died when his wife Elena passed away 3 years earlier. By midday, Boyd found Thunderstrike calmly standing beside the fence, surrounded by curious quarter horses. Instead of fear or aggression, the miniature seemed strangely comfortable among animals more than 10 times his size. But the real shock came 3 days later. Boyd was fixing a water trough when a young heifer cried out. Buttercup had tangled her leg in loose barbed wire. She thrashed in panic. Boyd grabbed his cutters and sprinted toward her, only to stop when he heard a sharp, urgent whinny. Thunderstrike stood in his small pen, calling out in rapid, high sounds that echoed across the pasture. Dusty Rose, Boyd's lead mare, lifted her head and trotted straight toward the trapped heifer as if she understood the miniature's call. She pawed the ground near the wire, showing Boyd exactly where the danger was. By the time Boyd freed the heifer, Thunderstrike stood quietly at his fence, watching with calm satisfaction. "Well, I'll be," Boyd said, breathless. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Word spread through Bexar County fast. Ranchers arrived to see the tiny horse, who was somehow helping manage cattle. And every single one left shaking their head in disbelief. But Boyd didn't laugh. Because as he watched thunder strike that evening, standing small and gentle under the wide Texas sky, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. He didn't know why this miniature had been sent to his ranch, but deep down he was starting to think the little horse wasn't a mistake at all. 3 days after Thunderstrike alerted Boyd to the trapped heifer, something happened that changed everything the old rancher believed about the tiny horse. It was early morning, the kind of quiet dawn where the Texas air hangs still and the cattle move slow. Boyd stepped out of the barn carrying a bucket of feed when his phone rang. The voice on the other end made his stomach twist. "This is Brutus Ironwood from Ironwood Miniature Horse Ranch in Oklahoma. I'm looking for a miniature horse named Thunderstrike. My records show the trailer stopped at your location." Boyd closed his eyes. His piece ended right there. "Yes, sir," he said slowly. "He's here. Had him for a few days now." "Well, he isn't supposed to be. Truck must have gone to the wrong Broken Horn Ranch. That horse is scheduled for auction in 2 days. He's caused nothing but trouble. I'm sending a truck today to pick him up." Boyd didn't answer right away. He looked toward the small pen where Thunderstrike stood, calm and watchful, his intelligent eyes following Boyd's every move. That tiny horse had done nothing but help since he arrived. And somehow, without Boyd noticing when it happened, he had already settled into the old man's heart. When Boyd hung up, his chest felt heavy. He walked to the fence and leaned on the rails. Thunderstrike walked over and pressed his little head against Boyd's leg, just as high as he could reach. "I'm sorry, little guy," Boyd whispered. "Looks like your vacation's over." Thunderstrike stayed there, his soft breath warm against Boyd's jeans, as if he understood every word. That was the moment Boyd changed his mind. He pulled out his phone again and dialed Brutus Ironwood back. "Mr. Ironwood, I'd like to buy Thunderstrike from you." The silence was long, then Brutus snorted. "You want to buy him?" "That animal has cost me more in damages than you'd believe." "How much?" Boyd asked. $8,000. Just to get him off my hands." "5,000, Boyd said firmly. "Cash." Another long silence, then Brutus gave in. "Deal. But he's your problem now." Boyd felt both relief and fear wash over him. $5,000 was a lot of money for a retired rancher. But something inside him whispered that this horse needed him. And maybe, just maybe, he needed the horse too. But the trouble didn't end there. That afternoon, Magnolia arrived with Dr. Autumn Silverstone, the county's best equine veterinarian. Dr. Silverstone examined Thunderstrike with a careful, practiced eye. She looked at the scars, the old rope burns, the tiny horse's tense posture whenever a stranger approached. "These records say he was aggressive," she said, flipping through paperwork. "But I think the problem was the facilities, not the horse. Miniatures are more sensitive than full-sized horses. If they're handled roughly, they shut down or fight back. He wasn't dangerous. He was scared." Thunderstrike stood quietly beside her, letting the vet check his legs, his neck, even his teeth. He didn't show a hint of aggression. "Boyd," Magnolia said softly, "this little guy wasn't meant to be a working horse. He was meant to find you." That idea settled into Boyd's heart and stayed there. But not everyone felt the same way. That evening, Boyd received a call from the person he feared hearing from the most, his daughter, Ivy. "Daddy," Ivy said sharply, "what is this? I'm hearing about you buying some problem miniature horse. Are you losing your mind out there?" Boyd rubbed his forehead. "It's not like that, Ivy." "Oh, I've seen the reports online," Ivy argued. "That horse has a record of biting handlers, breaking equipment, refusing commands." "Daddy, you're 68 years old, living alone on a ranch. You can't be dealing with dangerous animals." "It's not dangerous," Boyd insisted. "He just needed someone to understand him." "Well," Ivy said, her voice turning cold, "Fred and I have been talking. Maybe it's time we consider selling the ranch and moving you to Dallas, where you'll be safe." The words hit harder than any kick from a real horse. After Ivy hung up, Boyd sat on the porch staring at the fading sky. He felt more alone than ever. But then he heard a soft whinny. Thunderstrike stood at his fence, watching Boyd with those deep, understanding eyes. "You're not a problem," Boyd whispered. "You're just misunderstood, like me." Quote. Thunderstrike pressed his small nose between the fence rails. Boyd reached out and stroked the miniature's neck, feeling peace settle in his chest for the first time in years. But life had one more twist waiting for him. Later that night, Dr. Silverstone called with news that shook Boyd to the core. "Boyd, I just reviewed Thunderstrike's bloodlines again," she said, excitement in her voice. "Do you know what you actually own? His genetics are extraordinary. If you started a small breeding program, he could sire foals worth $10,000 to $15,000 each." Boyd stared at Thunderstrike grazing under the moonlight. The tiny horse lifted his head and looked back at him, as if sensing everything happening around him. A misdelivered miniature horse. A lonely widower. A ranch on the edge of being taken away. And now the possibility that this little horse might be worth more than Boyd's entire herd. For the first time in 3 years, Boyd felt something strong, warm, and alive rise inside him. Hope. Ivy Cartwright Monroe arrived at Broken Horn Cattle Ranch on a blazing Thursday afternoon, her rental SUV kicking up dust as she pulled into the driveway. At 43, she carried herself with the polished confidence of a Dallas attorney. But as she stepped out of the vehicle, her frustration was clear. "Daddy, where's this dangerous miniature horse I keep reading about?" she demanded as she marched toward the barn. Before Boyd could answer, Magnolia arrived with a distinguished man in pressed jeans and carrying an expensive leather bag. "Boyd, this is Dr. Steve West from the Texas A&M Equine Program," she said. "He's been studying Thunderstrike's genetic files." Ivy rolled her eyes. "Wonderful. Another expert." The group walked toward the side pasture. Thunderstrike grazed beside the full-sized quarter horses, looking like a child among giants but moving with confidence. His black and white coat glowed in the Texas sun, and the big horses stayed close to him as if he were part of their herd. Then, everything changed in an instant. A jackrabbit darted into the pasture, spooked by a hawk overhead. One of the quarter horses reared in panic. Thunderstrike moved faster than anyone thought a miniature could move. He rushed toward the rabbit, placing his tiny body between the frantic horse and the helpless animal. He let out a sharp, commanding whinny that froze the full-sized mare mid-rear. The rabbit escaped unharmed. Everyone was silent. Did that miniature horse just protect a wild rabbit? Ivy whispered. "Horses don't do that," Dr. West muttered, not without extraordinary intelligence. Thunderstrike walked toward them, calm as ever. He touched Ivy's hand with his tiny nose, a gentle greeting full of curiosity. Dr. West opened his leather bag. "Mr. Cartwright, his genetic profile is remarkable. Thunderstrike carries markers for unusually high cognitive abilities. Your horse is a once-in-a-lifetime animal." Ivy sank onto a fence post, stunned. "Daddy, I think I misjudged everything." That moment changed everything between them. But the world outside didn't stay quiet for long. Within days, news reporters lined the county road. Cameras rolled, drones hovered. Everyone wanted to see the genius miniature horse. The attention overwhelmed Thunderstrike, who pressed himself into the far corner of his pasture, trembling. Ivy confronted a crowd of reporters. "No press on the property, leave him alone." But more people came, researchers from universities, horse investors, trainers. Everyone wanted a piece of Thunderstrike. The worst was Roderick Goldspring, a billionaire horse investor from Kentucky. "Mr. Cartwright," he said on the phone, "I'll offer you $1 million for Thunderstrike today. Cash." Boyd stared at the number he wrote on a notepad. $1 million. Enough money to secure his retirement, save the ranch, and take care of his family for life. But when he looked out at the pasture, Thunderstrike's small body was shaking under the pressure of all the attention. "I'm sorry, sir," Boyd said. "He's not for sale." The offer doubled the next morning. $2 million, Goldspring said. You're walking away from a fortune, quote. But Boyd didn't waver. Some things are worth more than money. When the pressure became too much, Boyd finally told the crowd to leave. He even called the sheriff to move the news vans. It took hours. When the last vehicle left, Thunderstrike slowly approached, his tiny body still trembling. He placed his forehead against Boyd's leg, trusting him completely. "I'm sorry, little guy," Boyd whispered. "I should have protected you sooner." That night, Boyd sat beside his miniature horse under the stars. Thunderstrike rested his head on Boyd's boot with a tired sigh. The next day, Dr. Silverstone brought more research proposals. Boyd stopped her gently. "Doc, he's tired. He's had enough. This wasn't supposed to be his life." She looked at Thunderstrike and saw the truth. "You're right, Boyd. He needs peace." The calls kept coming. Goldspring made one last enormous offer. Universities begged for access. Documentaries asked for interviews. Boyd said no to every single one. "He didn't come here to be famous," Boyd told Ivy. "He came here to be safe." Quote, surprisingly, Ivy supported him. "Daddy, after watching all this, I think Mama sent you that little horse for a reason." So Boyd closed the institute. He stopped the testing. He turned away all media and all buyers. Most people thought he was crazy. But Thunderstrike changed. The trembling stopped. His eyes softened again. He played with the quarter horses. He started greeting Boyd with a cheerful whinny every morning. 6 months later, the ranch was quiet again. Thunderstrike had his peace back, and so did Boyd. Ivy stayed at the ranch more often and helped her father run things. Magnolia visited daily. Life was simple, calm, and good. One evening, as the Texas sky burned orange and purple, Boyd sat under his old oak tree. Thunderstrike rested his head on the old man's lap. The quarter horses grazed nearby, forming a peaceful circle around their miniature friend. Boyd stroked Thunderstrike's mane and smiled. "They called you Trouble," he whispered, "but you saved me." The tiny horse closed his eyes, content. Thunderstrike had been rejected, misunderstood, and sent to the wrong ranch by mistake. But the wrong delivery turned into the greatest blessing Boyd Cartwright ever received. A widower and a tiny horse had rescued each other. No money could buy that, and for the first time in years, Boyd felt sure of something. They were finally home.